So, yes, balance, living in balance. I hope you're all noticing what that's like, what throws you off balance, what brings you back to balance. I thought I'd talk a little bit tonight about a dimension of equanimity. Equanimity usually comes packaged in a 4-pack um, of the Brahma Viharas. It's one of the 4 divine abidings. They're usually translated as. They're 4 qualities of mind that characterize the awakened heart. And they are, I really think of them as one energy, the heart energy, but somehow to describe the heart energy takes 4 words in Buddhist psychology. It has to see 4 different aspects of it. And like most of these Buddhist lists, they're useful. They're kind of a useful map in our experience. So I'll just name the 4. Many of you have already heard them. But the first is loving kindness, metta. It's a word that's cognate with metta, friend, in Pali. And so it's the quality of heart that meets every person and with goodwill, wishing them well-being and happiness. So imagine going through your life, every person you meet, quality of metta, quality of just wishing them well as beings, knowing that every being is challenged by life, just wishing them goodwill. And then the second quality is compassion, karuna, which is specifically the quality of the heart in the presence of suffering. It's allowing the suffering of another to touch you and to make the heart tremble in an experience of not being separate from that suffering, not necessarily being identified with it as if it were you or as if it might happen to you. That's a different kind of thing we do. But just letting suffering touch us. Appreciative joy, or sympathetic joy, sometimes it's translated, mudita, is the quality of taking joy in someone else's joy, taking joy in someone else's good fortune. So the open heart is able to enjoy someone else's good fortune, just as if it were one's own. Good joy that somebody else is doing well, someone else is healthy, someone else just won the lottery. If that's actually a good thing to have happen to you, I'm not sure. From what I hear, it's not always so great. But take that sort of joy in other people's happiness. And then along with these 3 that are really kind of obviously matters of the heart, obviously ways to describe an open heart and what it's like, is joined equanimity, upekkha. And and sometimes people will go, well, what's that doing there? As if it's not a quality of the open heart, equanimity. And yet it is. It's the quality that grounds the rest, grounds it, and gives it stability, equanimity. So we're stabilizing ourselves at the same time that we might be sort of opening ourselves in this way in goodwill and compassion and sympathetic joy to other people. And the reason why I think this is important is that sometimes the qualities of heart require that sort of grounding. I work in a field in which, they talk about compassion fatigue, where you are with people who are suffering as a psychotherapist, and you can actually begin in some ways to be weighed down by it. Some of that is through identification. If you become identified in people's problems, you see yourself in them, your fears are realized in them. There's a kind of burden with that. there's even a kind of burden if, one is kind of always being touched by suffering in a certain sense. If it's not kind of grounded, if there's not a way that one kind of lets that be felt and able to just pass through the body, go into the earth, rest in some place other than in one's own nervous system, one's nervous system. And we human animals have very sensitive nervous systems. And so our very sensitive nervous systems allow us to really feel what other people feel around us, especially if we open our sensitivity. And I generally encourage people to do that. Many people close that down out of protection, become insensitive to their own feelings as well as other people's feelings. It's a common strategy. And yet there's such a huge loss to it in terms of actually being able to be touched by the world, be touched by other people, be touched by, the gift of conscious experience. And so, but if you do open, there's a sense, our sensitive nervous systems, we have to find balance in a certain way in that. How do we do that? It's a bit of a conundrum because our egos don't know how to do that. That's kind of the naughty thing. Is that when we're really grounded in genuine compassion, when the heart is really open, there's a quality of equanimity right there with it. I had an experience quite recently of being with someone who was suffering, and and it's definitely a moment when something showed up for that was almost not me. There's the kind of compassion you do for a living. Maybe some of you know what I mean. Maybe you're a nurse or a doctor or a psychotherapist, or even, if you're a financial advisor or something of that nature. There's a way that, when people are in pain, we kind of know how to be with them in a kind of this is how you're with somebody who's suffering and how you show that you care and so forth. And it's kind of it's genuine, but it's not what happens when the real gates of the heart open. And they open in a kind of mysterious way that's not in our kind of control to do. And so as I describe this, I'm not necessarily describing something that's simply because I'm so skillful at opening my heart. I might be, but this was a moment where just I felt this like river of feeling coming through my heart towards someone. It was just a spontaneous flow, and such a deep sense of connection. And right in there with it, and this is the equanimity part, this is the balance part, there was a letting go. It flowed because something let go about being able to change anything for that person. Things were not going well. And for just that time, there's the ability to just be present and not separate from someone else and let love flow. So the equanimity part, in a sense, was the letting go, the being willing to be helpless, if I can use that word, though it doesn't quite describe equanimity. But I do find that sometimes people run up against an inability to feel this kind of compassion because they're afraid of feeling someone else's helplessness in the face of something they can't control and something that's very painful to them. We're afraid of joining with that because we're afraid of our own helplessness. But just for a moment to let go of control, something else seems to step in. That's the the real deal when it comes to compassion. Not the professional compassion, not the egoically learned kind of compassion, but something quite immediate, functioning in its own energy, a genuine open heart. So that kind of led me to reflect a bit on this equanimity piece. What allows that? Classically in Buddhism, if you do equanimity practice, many of you have probably done loving kindness practice because it's fairly commonly done on retreats and so forth. And you direct a feeling of goodwill towards someone, yourself, other people, and you say phrases like, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering. I've even led these sorts of meditations, are fairly common. If you do equanimity practice, there's a phrase that goes with it. And it goes something like this. I didn't actually look it up because I haven't done it in ages, and I never really did much of this particular kind of meditation. But it runs something like, I am the heir of my karma. Everyone is the heir of their karma. Well, we will all receive the fruit of our actions, or something along those lines. So it's actually a meditation on karma. I have to say, personally, that reflection doesn't work very well for me. I don't actually find that opens up what I have come to understand as genuine equanimity. It seems to be kind of heady. It kind of meets me on a head level. It doesn't meet me on a heart level. And so I haven't found it to be that useful. I kind of know where it's aiming, but I just personally have found that it probably aims me a little more towards indifference. And there's this sense that it means someone deserves their suffering. And that doesn't sit with the sense of an open heart. When my compassion opened, it was not any sense that this person deserved or didn't deserve. Neither. It just what was. It was just present. And there was a being there who was going through it. And it was just what's real. A being going through it. And what I found helpful, what was kind of there in an implicit way, and I felt when I reflected on it, there was a sense of deep respect for the person who was going through it, the way they were meeting suffering, and the dignity of that. There was some trust that they could do it, and that we all have to do this in our lives. I don't think anybody gets away with not having some pretty heavy things happen in their life. If anybody thinks they've never had anything of great sorrow or pain happen to them, let me know if there's some out there. But my sense is everybody has, at least a few things that set them on their ear, that took them off their feet, that broke their heart, and they didn't actually know what to do about it. And if curiously, in those moments when life breaks your heart, there's this, if you pay attention, there's this sense of free fall where you kind of did everything you could to avoid suffering, and like, boing, right, it's right there. And there can be a sense of letting go because you don't have any other choice. It's a profound moment of humbling our doer and humbling our sense of being in control and being the one calling the shots, being the one who's able to avoid suffering and get what we want. All of those things, which we as egos want to do. There's a holy moment there in the moment that the heart breaks. And And I have a deep respect for it, a deep respect and a trust in it. The people I'm with don't always have a trust in it. I often think they'll never come together again after their heart is broken. But there's this strange quality about the heart that when it's broken, it comes back bigger, stronger, potentially. You know, some people get lost in their broken heart. But the potential is there for the heart to come back bigger, stronger in some way. And not because you did it, you know, not because you engineered that to happen. It did it of itself. It did it of its own intelligence and wisdom. And so, again, I'm still talking about equanimity. Somewhere in equanimity, there is this trust about that, I think. This trust that people, including oneself, can go through things that seem impossible, that are in no way desirable, and yet people go through them. And there is some presence that is willing to do that, even as they're kicking and screaming. Now, equanimity is the feeling of awareness. If it has a feeling, if I were to name the feeling of awareness, it is the feeling of equanimity, the feeling of the calm, the peace. Peace is probably a deeper word than calm, the peace of equanimity. We used to teach in a room where, you know, we were all together, and I used to use this analogy. It's probably better than Zoom rooms, but you might still be able to imagine it. You know, if we were in a room and suddenly someone came in with a machine gun and started gunning people down, we would all start screaming and ducking for cover. It would be a moment of total panic and terror. And awareness would still be there, recording it, present. We might not notice that because in a moment of terror, we often lose our connection with that quality of the mind, but it's still there. And for a while, my practice was, you could try this. Once I started noticing awareness, noticing this quality of being the space in the room, of being some people call the witness. I don't really like that word particularly. It has a distance to it that I don't find to be accurate. But I do like it. It's the very space of things, the here and now-ness of things. That's always present and is always a peace, and it doesn't argue with anything that walks into it. There is something which we are called awareness that doesn't argue with anything that arises or anything that leaves. And this is the deathless. It doesn't, you know, or the rest of us argues. Oh my goodness, the rest of us can argue with what is. The rest of us can have all sorts of experiences, and as it's very human to be that, all those other experiences. But there's a quality of the mind which we can begin to tune into and notice, which is always here, always now, always awake, always, it doesn't resist anything that comes into us or that leaves us. That is the heart, you know, that is the nature of the heart as awareness, is this steadiness. It's like the groundless ground. So when you ground yourself in equanimity, I mean, you can literally use the ground. I think as embodied people, we can relate to the ground as a place we stand on, a place of stability. But when it comes to the heart is actually grounded in awareness. It's grounded in something formless that is actually nothing and nowhere. Isn't that weird? Isn't that truly weird? And as we start to notice that nothingness which we are, that awake presence which is always here in every experience, the mind starts to ground itself. The heart starts to ground itself. I'm kind of using the two interchangeably here, but I mean both. You start to wake up to that. So I find that a little more useful than reflecting on karma, but I don't want to dissuade anybody from reflecting on karma if you are so inclined. Another real support for equanimity is not knowing what should happen here. When the conceptual mind comes in with all sorts of knowing of what should be happening, trouble erupts, suffering ensues, clinging ensues. So there's a kind of quality of presence which doesn't impose a sense of what should be here. It just actually is touched by what is. And in that quality of being touched by what is, sometimes there arises in a person a movement towards doing something, which could be to relieve suffering or make something better. But it's very different from the mind convinced it knows what should be. It comes directly out of the heart in a way that's hard to describe, rather than from the head and its kind of notions of this is it. And I think that one of the grounds of equanimity is our meditation practice and our mindfulness practice, in as much as we truly are open to feeling unpleasantness in our body and unpleasantness in our mind. What is kind of ugly, boring, unadorned, smelly, rough, tedious. There's something about opening to the unwanted aspects of experience that's very powerful for equanimity. I'm not saying that sometimes the wanted aspects of experience can be troublesome too. Getting what you want can be trouble, can be intoxicating in a way that can lead to heedlessness and not necessarily equanimity either. But perhaps it's just my own aversive kind of nature. I just feel like we need a little more help with the things that are uncomfortable and that we don't like. This week you might try just one or two of the things that I said. What I would suggest, the one I think is quite powerful, is not knowing what should be happening here. Just try it out. Don't take my word for it. Try it out. Try it out in a moment of like feeling ill will towards someone politically or at your work. Just take a moment to notice it. Ill will. Step back and just, what would happen here if I didn't actually know how this person should be? If I let go of that, what would it be? What would happen? See how that changes things. The other one, I said last week is the dropping in the word, I really want to be there for this. It's a powerful phrase. It's a powerful phrase. Sometimes I say to myself, I can't take it away. It's like an acknowledgement of a certain kind of powerlessness that I find really allows the heart to step forward when I'm with someone else's suffering, even when I'm with my own. I can't take this away. Protective parts of our mind try to take our grief away from us. They're doing it out of kindness, out of love for us, but I'm not sure it's so helpful. They might just let us have it. See what happens.